Welcome back, everyone, and hello to those who are just joining us. My name's Tara, and I'm the account manager here at Charity Digital. And for those, sorry, just for audio purposes, I am a white female with brown hair. I'm 28 years old, and today I'm wearing a dark blue Charity Digital t-shirt, and I have gold earrings in. So yeah, pleasure to be with you. And our next session this afternoon is going to be a panel discussion exploring the evolution of event fundraising. So our panel moderator this afternoon will be Laura, who will be joined by Lorna Poultney, who is Special Events Lead at Parkinsons UK. We're also joined by Ahmad, who is Director of Operations at Humanity First. Adam Stanier, who is co-founder and COO at Fundraising Event Experts, Emma Live. So before handing over to Laura, just a quick reminder that all of today's sessions are being recorded and will be available alongside the slides at a later date. Closed captions are also available for today's sessions. And if you have any questions at all, then please do pop them in the Q&A section and upvote those that you want to see answered the most so that we can make sure we go to those first. Hopefully not, but if you do encounter any sound or image issues at all, then please do let us know in the chat and we'll make sure that we do our very best to get the session back to normal as soon as possible. So without further ado, I will hand over to Laura and the panel.
Thank you, Tara. So yeah, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Laura Stanley. I'm a content writer at Charity Digital, and for audio purposes, I'm a white woman in my mid-30s with long blonde hair, and I'm also wearing my trusty Charity Digital navy t-shirt and headphones. So yeah, we're here today to talk about the evolution of fundraising events. Fundraising events have become a vital revenue stream for charities, with both appetite for participation and income only growing. However, it is also an area that has seen a tremendous amount of change as well as growth, with the rise and fall and rise again of virtual events, the post-pandemic return of physical events, and innovations on how we donate. In this panel session, in partnership with Emma Live, we will discuss how fundraising has transformed and how events have changed with it. We are going to explore the past, present, and future of fundraising events, envisioning how charities can reduce complexity and save time, while identifying opportunities for creativity in the future. As Tara said, I'm joined by Adam Stanier, co-founder and COO at Emma Live, Fazal Ahmad, Director of Operations at Humanity First, and Lorna Poultney, Special Events at Parkinsons UK. Before I get started on the introductions, or on the discussion, sorry, if I could hand over to each of our panelists just to introduce themselves and their experience around fundraising events. If I start with Adam.
Thanks so much, Laura. Hi there, I'm Adam Stanier, co-founder Emma Live. For visual purposes, I am a very scruffy looking, just turned 40-year-old wearing a black jumper, which tends to be my MO, monochrome. Yeah, pleasure to be on the panel. We've got a great panel today and lots of ideas and thoughts around the evolution of fundraising. And if I hand over to Lorna to perhaps describe herself and introduce herself.
Yep. Hi everyone. So like Adam, really happy to be here today to talk to you all. So for audio purposes, I've got long brown hair, glasses on, a green cardigan, and a Parkinsons lanyard to represent Parkinsons UK. So I am the special events lead at Parkinsons UK, and I've been in sort of charity special events for the past 7, maybe 8 years. And I was with Muscular Dystrophy UK for a long time, and then also with the charity events consultancy, Coveted Creates. So I'll hand over to Faz now.
Hi, my name is Fazal Ahmad. Everyone calls me Faz. I am a almost 60 British Asian, not quite a full head of hair. I think I'm wearing a dark blue suit, but I am slightly colorblind. So if anyone thinks it's a different color, please let me know. I'm in a small office here near Oxford. I'm the Global Operations Director of a charity called Humanity First. I've been doing this for a couple of decades, and we've got registered branches in 65 countries. So I'll be chipping in with what it's like doing events for a global NGO.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's lovely to have you all here. Thank you. So if we head on to the first question, how have fundraising events changed in recent years? It's a big question. If I start with Adam.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's important just to frame this panel discussion actually, because we're all coming at it from slightly different angles, which is fantastic. My experience in the charity and fundraising world is from a technology standpoint, and clearly the evolution of technology in the last 20 or so years has been very dramatic. But when I talk about event fundraising, I usually talk about two different areas, one being what we kind of class as sweaty fundraising, which tends to be your individual giving, where your mates and your family do take part in a whole bunch of crazy challenges and marathons, and we all support them because they tend to do it on behalf of charities. So we kind of class that as the sweaty side of event fundraising. And then we have what we call the special side of event fundraising, which tends to operate around the slightly more traditional gala dinner or lunch or golf day type events. And that's where I've got a history working actually alongside Lorna. And we've delivered lots of events together, but it kind of goes before my time with Lorna, in as much as her background being at muscular dystrophy and running, I think, 7 or 8 or maybe more rounds of events there. So yeah, I think it might be worth, and then I know Faz is coming at it from a slightly different perspective as well. And perhaps Faz, do you want to kick off just with your perspective on your telethons and things?
Well, I probably go back the furthest. And I've been doing fundraising events since the early 90s, so probably 40 odd years. I would say what I've seen as the kind of journey is from physical events with, the cluster of people that you know that you've got together, physical exhibits and physical literature, and trying to keep them engaged, to now virtual and hybrid, where you're constantly looking bottom left to see how many people are actually in, how many have gone, how long did they stay, some of them face to face, some of them virtual, and moving away from literature to QR codes. It's a whole new ball game. So that's the journey I've been on. And I suppose in the early days, if you looked at the early 90s, we used to do events where you had people's rapt attention for 2 or 3 hours, however long your event was. Now you're lucky if you've grabbed them for 10 minutes. The attention span is totally gone, and they don't want chapter and verse. They just want, tell me the 2 things I need to know, and then I'll decide whether I'm interested or not.
That's really interesting to hear how it's changed so much, I think. Lorna, did you coming at this from a sort of how has technology made fundraising events easier, transform them in your experience?
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to come in from that event manager perspective. And I guess when I started, I think my job was more admin. We had to send out sort of physical invites, thank you letters, taking paper bids on the night, sort of getting guests to fill in payment forms, and then spending weeks chasing everyone to make the payment, and sort of printing off vouchers, handing them out manually on the night, and sort of the workforce that we'd need at events and sort of pre and post event was really a big part of event fundraising. But I think over the past few years, it's been really exciting to sort of see how platforms like Emma Live and sort of other event management platforms, how they've kind of transformed that landscape. So now at sort of all of our events, we'll sort of send out an e-vi. Guests can sign up to the event on the platform and fill in their sort of dietary requirements without us even needing to be involved. We can capture bids and payments on the night, so we don't have to do that chasing post-event. And I think that's really key when so much of a donation is sort of in the moment. And I think this has just made a massive difference to is sort of event management and how we can do more events, we can use less staff time and like focus more of our energies into the strategy and messaging on the night. And I guess things like QR codes as well, we don't need to do a program necessarily. You can get people to scan a QR code and the programs on their phone. So I think there's just so much technology out there that everyone should be sort of trialing at their events and seeing how much easier it can make life at events. And I guess another area that I really wanted to talk about is how sort of audience has changed over the past few years. So I think so much more now than ever, events need to be purpose-led. I think when I started in the industry, a lot of the corporates that we worked with were really happy to attend a charity event just because it's for charity. And they could sort of use it for client entertainment, a fun night out for colleagues. But I think with budgets being slashed, particularly post-COVID, post-Brexit, companies are really thinking carefully about what they attend. So I think to get companies at your events in the first place, we really need to be showcasing like what the purpose of the event is and what is it funding, who is it for, and why should they come to that event. And I think also we need to really play a big part in making guests feel inspired to give on the night. I think Adam's already said about my work with Muscular Dystrophy UK, but I did their flagship gala, the Microscope Ball, with the property industry for, I think I did it 7 times. And when we started, the focus was very much on the fun, and the committee really wanted it to just be a good night out in the industry. But by the sort of latter years of working on it, the narrative and this compelling story that we created on the night was so paramount to inspiring guests to put their hands in their pocket and give on the night. And again, like me and Adam have spoken about how people are less sort of willing to just sort of put their hands up and bid on a big ticket item. They're more likely to put their hand up if you've got sort of X amount will fund this many nurses. And I think that's something that we really need to think about in charity events now.
Yeah. And just touching on one of your earlier points, Lorna, there about the kind of reach that an event has nowadays, and almost the globalization of an in-person event. And I know that sounds slightly strange, but we get involved at Emma Live with in and around about 1,000 events a year, and probably at least half of those are in person. But we actually experienced an event recently where there was some amazing women that raised money for a cancer charity that climbed Kilimanjaro and ran an event at the end of it to kind of celebrate and raise funds. And their takeaway was that there was actually more bids from people out of the room than inside the room. And that actually inspired them to create a new brand, which is launching soon, which Emma Live is involved with, called A Noble Gift. And the premise of A Noble Gift is to have fundraising online 365, 24/7. And instead of relying on an event to sell gifts and experiences and things, it's a platform where you can feature an item for a given charity. That the prerequisites that the items need to be 100% donated, and the charity receive 100% of the proceeds. A Noble Gift monetizes it by taking a small fee as a buyer's premium, so the buyer ends up paying a percentage above the sale price. But it's those advances in technology which again just help to elevate both the in-person experience, the globalization, and ultimately when we sit in rooms and forums with lots of event fundraisers, the one key thing when we poll it is their objective is to raise more money. And it sounds simple, but obviously just having lots of different elements for people to use, different technologies that people can use to maximize that objective is probably the most exciting thing in the last 20 or so years, because when we rewind it back, as Lorna says there, people filling in bids on cards. And I also think we've seen quite a big shift from, for want of a better term, and it probably goes back all the way to the Romans and their view on philanthropy, and that's ego. And when I started in event fundraising, we would go to a live event and see a CEO bid for a Mini Cooper, and he or she would win it and throw it back into the auction, and then competing CEO bids and wins it and throws it back into the auction. And it was a very, very interesting, ugly time for fundraising. And it was not about the cause, it was about them. And again, as Lorna kind of alluded to there, getting your messaging right and totally on point with the audience as well. There's no point trying to sell too high to an audience that isn't able, or too low for an audience that's expecting more. And that's the real skill and challenge that the industry kind of has. And then our job is naturally to offer the technology and the solutions all the way through the event management process. So Lorna touched on e-invites, e-ticketing, guest check-in, data collection, which I know has been a big thing for Faz, around some of the challenges around data collection around and GDPR. Don't know if you want to touch on your experience on that, Faz.
Well, actually, I was going to start off. It's interesting you were talking about paper bids. I think back to the late 80s when Comic Relief and Red Nose Day were first starting, and I was doing, say, marathon events raising funds for Great Ormond Street. And I was working at British Aerospace at the time. And I'd used to have, 5 or 6 scrawny bits of paper and go around a department at a time, getting people to sign up and pledge how much. If I do this, how much will you donate? And it was based on how many people I could grab over a 3-week period. And, for one event, I think I got 600 people to sign up. But then I had to spend weeks going around all of them saying, have you got your fiver now? Here's my bruises and my photos to prove I did it. Now with technology like Just Giving, and there's loads of these platforms, you can just send it out to 200 contacts instantly and watch as the donations go up and up and up, and they donate there, and then they can give you gift aid. It's so much easier. But GDPR has been the bane of my life. So, 20 years ago, we used to sign up lots of people, and then because they were donating, we kind of naturally assumed they're interested. We'd send them information on the outcomes of the work that we were doing, and if they wanted to get involved in future events, send them links. Now, GDPR came in because of the kind of nuisance calls we were all getting. The nuisance calls haven't stopped, but charities, especially small charities, have been absolutely mullered. So someone gives us a donation, we have to go back to them and say, can you sign this to say you're happy for us to stay in touch? 30% will, the rest of them can't be bothered, or it's just too much hassle. And so charities are losing out, whereas the scammers and people that we were hoping to stop with GDPR still doing very well. I get no shortage of calls from Southeast Asia and God knows where else.
Would you say GDPR is the biggest challenge you face when it comes to fundraising events?
No, it's not the.
There's always a bigger one.
There's many. So I've been doing fundraising for almost 40 years. I think what we've seen is that as technology has come in, it's been amazing. And there are many great things that technologies have, you've got global reach. This morning I was dealing with donors in Australia, in Ivory Coast, in America, in Canada, all over the place. You can do that with technology. But the flip side is that everyone has their preferred communications tools. And there's 2 things. One, someone can message me and say, I want to donate. We did a big fundraiser for a new hospital in Ivory Coast over the weekend. We raised $130,000. Since then, I've had people messaging me, but I'm constantly thinking, did they do it on Messenger, on WhatsApp, on email, on text? where, I'm searching all of them to say, where is that message? And by the time they've sent it, I've got another 200 different WhatsApp groups messaging me as well. So that's the first challenge. The second thing is, just when you think, your audiences now also have their own preferred tech, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or X or TikTok, just when you think you know how to communicate with them, my kids are like that. They call me a dinosaur. I'll send something out on X and they'll say, nobody uses X anymore. We're on TikTok. So I'll send it on TikTok and they'll say, oh, we're on this new platform. It's just bewildering. And, in doing that and going cross-platform, the other challenge is how to keep it consistent. So if you've done a message on 5 platforms, have you updated the other platforms? It's a nightmare.
Adam, that was something you talked a bit about with how global events are now and how the reach is mad. How do you, what?
Well, in terms of the broader, biggest challenges you face when it comes to event fundraising, I mean, we see both ends of the spectrum where there's in-person events on the rise, and we see events on the decline. And the innovation that is having to take place within the event space is dramatic. And I mean, our platform has been used for a whole multitude of things, from, I mean, literally karaoke nights where, smallish audiences would pay to either have their friends or colleagues or peers sing, or actually the person that's nominated to sing gets an opt-out to make a pledge to remove themselves from the embarrassment it would be in my case of having to do karaoke. But yeah, sports days. So the traditional kind of events, the sit down 3 course, 5-6 hours, they are still very, very available, and there's a huge amount of them, and that's probably one of the challenges, that there's probably a saturation for the amount of philanthropists and people that are looking to give. And of course, alongside the volume of in-person events, the volume of charities that are available for people to make their choice. And if they're engaged, if you can get them engaged, then they'll remain sticky. And if you can't keep them engaged, there'll be someone pulling at their coattails to bring them across to a different charity and a different cause. So that the landscape from 20 or 30 years ago is dramatically different. And there's a small example which was with a charity that we did some work with, where they used to write out for donations to the Harden's top 200 restaurants, and they would get about 50 to 60% response, positive response. And they'd run a gala and they'd have 120 different restaurant experiences. They did the same up until a few years ago, because the response rates dropped to like 1 to 2%. And that's because the restaurants, as an example, have their own tactics. They have their own strategy. They've become kind of self-aware that their purpose of supporting their cause is fundamental to them, and not just because they got asked by a biggest charity. And again, Lorna, I guess you can probably talk at that a little bit with your experiences with MD and Parkinsons.
In terms of trying to get prizes.
Well, trying to secure prizes, the nature of attendees, and that kind of competitive nature of the event landscape.
I think it's sort of, how do you make an event stand out? And I think the events that seem to have real longevity are those events that are sort of aligned with an industry. So I think that's something that Muscular Dystrophy UK and the Microscope are really lucky that they've got the commercial property industry behind it, and they want to attend on year, because it's sort of that calendar invite. So if you don't have that luxury, and that's something that we're trying to do at Parkinsons UK, is like, we want to launch a new event. How do we make that cut above the rest. And like, we're looking into that now. Like, is it what it's funding? Is it because it's a unique experience? We're still trying to figure that out. But I think kind of for a successful special event anyway, you need a committee, a strong committee that's going to support you, or you need that star talent to kind of really draw people in. I mean, we were really hoping to get Ant and Dec, but they're too busy. But people would want to come to that, right? So it's finding something that really stands out. And I think another example of this is an event that I was working on when I was at Coveted Creates. It's with a charity called All Child, and they sort of support children in sort of disadvantaged areas that are struggling academically or emotionally, and they provide sort of link workers who would support children within the schools with their homework, or do sort of social emotional sessions, and they'd also fund activities. And feedback from the donors was that we don't want to go to another boring gala ever again. So we really worked with that committee to design an event that they would want to go to. So the event is actually taking place tonight, so they're all probably very busy setting it up right now. But we planned it in a school. Guests will be treated as if they are joining that all-child cohort, and they will go to school and experience 2 of those sessions, taste the session, and then hear from the children like what that event, what that session means to them and how it's changed their life. And then so it's sort of like an immersive interactive event, and then they'll finish sort of with a school dinner, but it won't taste like a school dinner, in the school hall. And that's when we'll sort of ask them to give. And I think a lot of the ask will also be after the event, but it sold out so quickly, and the committee was so behind it because they're like, I've never been to an event like this. So I think kind of what Adam was saying, that we really need to be creative and think outside the box. And again, with Parkinsons UK, something that I would love to do is create an event that makes people realize how frustrating it is to live with Parkinsons, and make people almost feel what that experience is. And again, I'm still working on it, but it's just trying to think differently, I think.
I mean, again, that's, events like this have changed so much with technology. So we do a lot of fundraising dinners when there's an emergency, an earthquake, a response to a tornado, a tsunami. In the old days, we used to get 300 or 400 people in a room, spend 2 hours with them, make it interesting, maybe have a live feed from Indonesia, from a tsunami or wherever. The difference now is that whereas before you collected what you collected on the night and that was it, now people send the link to their friends and say this was amazing, and it's actually the cause that gets them interested and the outcomes that we're generating. And sometimes we find there's a tale of 2 or 3 months after the event, we're still getting donations in, and we've done nothing more for it. We've just inspired a few people. They end up leaving the event as our advocates, talking to their friends and getting additional people to donate. So that's been a real positive from, I suppose, the more virtual and hybrid approach to events. It's not just the guys who turn up on the night, it's who they talk to afterwards.
And sorry, Adam, are you gonna? Oh, anyone else here? Oh, sorry, we seem to have a bit of technical difficulty.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Perfect.
great. Sorry. Yeah, I think that just talks a lot to humans being social animals ultimately, and thriving on connection and cooperation and social bonds, really. And I guess the reason why events, I firmly believe in, even a traditional format, are definitely here to stay, because it's that vehicle for promotion, and being in something together. And we've seen some really interesting practical examples of that, both from a technology side and the tactics side of fundraising. One of those things which I saw recently was a donor had offered up a sum of money. It was about £10,000, and there was 100 people at the event. And instead of that person being responsible for the £10,000, he gifted £100 to the 100 people that were there. and said, you are responsible for this £100. And what that led the 100 people to do was to say, well, actually, if someone's made the gesture to me to offer me the 100 and is wanting my input on where it's directed, I've got now a propensity to top that number up. So there was an opportunity for them to say, well, actually, I'm going to write 200 on here, and the person that's underwritten the 100 you get, but you also get my 100. And it's that peer-to-peer nature. And then, from a technology standpoint, having leaderboards at pledge moments throughout events where there is that ask and, on screen, and it can be anonymized, and it very frequently is anonymized, but you get that peer-to-peer nature of people standing up next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, and visually seeing it in that moment, as well as then obviously the kind of long tail of donations post event, and seeing that flurry still come in, as you described there, Faz.
And we did something like that at the microscope ball as well, where we had these sort of good box machines in the middle of the table where people just tap to donate, and we set them so it would automatically appear to £30 at the end of the pledge. And this was after the sort of big ticket pledge moments. And we just asked our host to say to everyone, like, if every single person taps £30 right now, we'll raise sort of £10,000 in sort of 5 minutes. And I think we raised £7,000 in 5 minutes. Like I think sort of 3/4 of the room tapped. And it was that peer-to-peer thing, as well as we asked them to sort of pass the machine to each other. So you either had to tap it or sort of sneakily pretend you had. But I think with that £30 ask, it was just a great way of getting everyone collectively involved. And I think technology has really helped with that.
I read a report quite recently that was saying how many people want to enter as teams, and it's just so interesting that that's such a big motivator. But then it makes so much sense when personal connection to a charity is like a big motivation for donating anyway. It's so interesting. And I think it gives a lot of hope for the future of fundraising events. As Adam says, I don't think they're going anywhere. So what do we expect they will look like? Is there anything that we should be looking out for? Should I start with Lorna?
I hope you wouldn't say me first,
Oh,
but I think
I'll go.
Adam, you go. I'll go next.
Yeah, well, I mean, from our standpoint, it's events can be very inefficient. So being capable of running an event in an efficient way is super important. And optimization of events is also super important. And so actually there is definitely some technology out there that we're also utilizing in the AI space. And I know it's very on trend at the moment to talk about AI, but I see that in a few different guises for the future. One, there's an element of predictive selectability using AI on audiences and interrogating what a charity database looks like, and pulling out those individuals and people or groups of people or industries or verticals that will actively look to get involved in a live event campaign. And although we haven't kind of gone through a process at the moment, we're speaking with a great company that operate in that space on donations, called Dotaro, and trying to model some things around if we can put that into a charity and pop out using data and AI, the types of people that want to get engaged in those events. Then secondly, the practical nature of using AI. I think I can talk about this, but we're introducing some optimization using AI inside Emma, where if people get donated a dining experience or a football shirt or whatever it might be, using AI to say, write me a description. My audience is 40 to 65, 70% male to female, and it will create the most optimal description for that item. So that marketing-led element of AI will naturally help to increase the uptake. There's also something around using some e-commerce trends within a live auction or fundraising, both online and in person, and using categories of information. When people browse for a I don't know if I use shopping as an example. Yeah, not that I do a great deal of shopping. I basically wear a black jumper every day. If you search on, I don't know, ASOS for a jumper, it will come up with the pair of socks that match, the trousers that match, and all those types of things. There's no reason why we shouldn't be using those same philosophies within a fundraising mode and mechanism. So I think there's lots of exciting things like that to come. Bit more gamification as well, because I think people want that fun, high energy moment out there. So those are a few which I think are going to be really interesting to watch for the future, and certainly in development plans for what we've got up our sleeve.
Brilliant. Thank you. It sounds very exciting. Very, all things go at MLI. Lorna, what are you feeling ready?
I guess it's kind of continuing a bit on from what Adam says, and like not just churning out the same old event for the sake of it, really thinking about who you want to engage, how much money you want to raise, like what story is going to resonate with that audience. I think it's so important. I think really just encouraging people to test different technology and try different things at each event. I think that's so important. Like, for example, we did sort of a private launch of a new appeal, and we sort of regurgitated the content that we created for that event into 2 webinars to an audience that the audience or supporters that couldn't attend. And we were able to get donations, and it was so little effort, but we were able to hit a whole extra audience that couldn't attend in person. So I think it's just always thinking creatively, testing things. And I think we touched on this when we spoke before, but I think another thing to start thinking about is how we're going to appeal to Gen Z. And I don't know what the answer to that is yet, but it's definitely something that we need to start thinking about.
Definitely. That's and thank you. So, and Faz, what do you hope that the future of challenge fundraising events will look like?
Well, we're kind of already seeing it. I mean, we on any given year, we probably do about 300 or 400 events around the world, and different audiences respond in different ways. But I would say one trend that I'm seeing is no longer are people wanting to play a passive role. They want to be immersed, and we see that in 2 or 3 ways. We, first of all, as a charity, we have many doctors who go out to disaster zones with us. We have doctors, teachers, engineers who go out to Africa and Central America with us on projects. When they talk about their experiences, it inspires other people. Secondly, we're using virtual reality more. So if you think back to the Turkey earthquake, almost a year and a half, 2 years ago, we took a team out there. We had teams working there for about 6 months, but we also took a team out there with 360 cameras, and they took good footage, and then we put that onto VR headsets so that people could walk around as if they were in the Hatay province and seeing the destruction all around them, and it brought it to life for them. We did something similar we have a project called Gift of Sight, which is prescription glasses and cataract surgery in low-income regions. And we generated a video again for a VR headset to say, this is what it would look like if you've got a cataract, and you can dial it in and out and say, blimey, I can't see anything. So in that way, we're finding that people get immersed into what we do, and then we don't have to push them, as a cause. They want to donate, and they also want to volunteer. So that's something that we're seeing more and more of. And people want to understand, gone are the days where you just say, we've done 5,600 water hand pumps for people who can't access water. Numbers are okay, but really they want to understand impact. They want to know real stories, and understand almost what it feels like for the person they're trying to help. And that's the direction I'm seeing us going in.
That's really that's everything that we've talked about. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and hopefully that will translate for the Gen Z audience as well, as you say, Lorna. I hope that we can that we can use events to translate that message. It would be really helpful. Shall we head to some questions? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
So we've had quite a few in. A lot about cut through actually. So someone has said they run a sorry, bear with me. Technical difficulties again, sorry. There we go. I run a few large-scale events each year, and we offer a lot of free activities, but they're well attended, but they want to know how to expand them in order to maximize profits and help people to understand that it is a fundraising event, as because it sort of gets lost among, within large-scale events. Does anyone have any advice on how to expand and maximize?
I think again, I would say that we've had people doing all kinds of weird and wacky things, zip line events or this, that, and the other, charity walks and runs, but it's always good to bring them back to the cause. Why are we doing this? And making it immersive. Then, irrespective, at one event we might have 10 or 15 different activities going on, but we try and keep a theme running through all of them so that people remember why they're doing it and what they're trying to contribute towards.
Yeah, I think similar thread. Content is just king within any elements, and we see some of the fundraising event challenges are we'll see a lot of beneficiary events, i.e. an awards dinner where there's a charitable element which probably ticks a box for the event organizers, and they're trying to do a good thing, so I'm certainly not critical of it, but the audience engagement tends to be quite low, and it is usually because they don't get the airtime to talk about cause enough. So I think from a charity perspective, and again, I've never worked for a charity, so I'm sure it's much harder than it sounds, but engaging the organization that is supporting you being there in a way that is going to be mutually beneficial, and that mutual beneficial part is allowing a platform to talk about the cause, and it doesn't need to be long, but having some really key information that relates to the activities that the person that is asking the question can kind of relate to. But yeah, I'd say just ensuring that kind of relatability and content leading the way is key.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Sorry, bear with me. How would you encourage a sense of community for a virtual event? In the past, we have set up a Facebook group for participants, but are keen to expand and improve. Any pointers on this one?
I guess it depends on the type of virtual event. So it's whether you could have sort of timings for specific moment information to be released. So say it was a challenge and they're releasing the leaderboard, could you tell everyone like an email saying like log on at this time and we'll be announcing the winner? You could do that on YouTube, for example, and people write in the comments saying, oh, I can't believe we won, or something like that. I think during COVID, we did like a virtual gala, and I'm sure lots of people did this, but we asked everyone to dress up and post pictures of themselves dressed up and what they were doing to sort of help fundraise and celebrate the night. So I think it's really creating personal moments that everyone can get involved in, and having like set times for things, and sometimes creating competitive elements as well. So like you've got to get to this amount first, and having, like Adam said, on so many platforms now you can have leaderboards of people taking part in the challenge. So I think things like that as sort of a first port of call.
Yeah, we saw a lot of through COVID, the dine online and they would organise that with a ticket purchase, you might receive a kind of DIY, dinner thing to make. And the principle was that at 8:15 there was the call for dinner, and you were expected to be sitting, with your kind of knife and fork and going through it together. So I guess that's a reasonable idea. But also, just I think keeping that engagement online is critical, where you don't have that mass audience of people to kind of communicate with in the real world. I suppose it's the real world online, but in person. So maybe engaging through polls or surveys. And there's something that we did for a virtual event, which was like a talent show, and people had to participate in who's going to win the talent show. So they see 3 or 4 or 5 different things virtually, small snippets, and had to vote for the winner, and that then plays out in real time. So I think there's a few things that you can try and do just to keep that participation engagement motivated.
Yeah, and I think with hybrid events, it's really important when you've got people joining virtually that they have their moments at the live events. So we recently did our Park-on event, and whenever we did Q&A, we would always make sure at least 2 or 3 of those questions came from the audience. Everyone that was watching the live stream could comment, ask questions. We had members of staff replying to them immediately, and I think the turnout was sort of 300 to 400, which is really good for that style event. And a lot of people stayed online because they really felt a part of it. So I think if you're doing hybrid, it's making sure those virtual guests are treated as if they're there.
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because we all know that, in Humanity First, I have probably 100 plus WhatsApp groups for different projects that we're doing, different events that we're doing, and so on. And on the one hand, it gets quite interesting when the numbers grow. On the other hand, the more numbers grow, the less personal it gets, and then the less engagement you get. And some people find that intimidating. Whereas for us, the real, I suppose what we're finding is that if you get numbers of people coming to an event, they're almost like consumers, and you're trying to get them to buy as much or participate as much whilst they're there, and then they're gone. Whereas the real benefit for us that we've seen over decades is if you convert those consumers into advocates and ambassadors, then they go on spreading the message, and suddenly that 20 people that you were talking to becomes 1,000, and you start getting new revenue streams you didn't even know about. So it's about, I think it's quality rather than quantity. It's about building those personal relationships and touch points, and getting people to understand the what, the why. What are we actually contributing towards? What impact is it gonna have? And once a group of people get enthused in what you're doing, they'll become ambassadors for you. And then you don't have to worry about, are there only 20 people on my group? Those 20 might generate 1 million for you.
Were you talking about the quality of events and versus the quantity? How do you decide when it's time to refresh an event? So you've got lots of different audiences, maybe it's time to add a new one, but how do you make that decision? Sorry, does anyone? It's a bit of a big one, I guess.
It really depends on the audiences that you've got supporting your charity. So, we've got older people who engage in a totally different way and through totally different channels. And sometimes we find that we're focused on online events, and we assume that, go on this link or go on YouTube or, Facebook Live or whatever it is. But my mum wouldn't go on that. She wouldn't know how the hell to get on that. Whereas if I said to her, go on this channel on Sky at 3 o'clock, she'll do it. At the same time, we assume that youngsters are au fait with that, but actually they're very selective. My son is at uni doing esports, And he'd jump in if you said it was Rocket League, but if you said it's a normal fundraiser, he's not interested. He's got the attention span of a goldfish. So you always need a mixture of events, a basket of events to appeal to different types of audiences. There's still a place for those cake sales. There's still a place for those fundraising dinners. There's still a place for the face-to-face auctions, which is harder to do virtually. I used to do that AFC Wimbledon, probably the greatest football club in the world, and we used to do auctions. We got people like Dave Bassett. I did a fundraiser where I got Dave Bassett to come along, and we had a what's his name? One of the 66 players. His son's a comedian. We got him to come along, and we did an auction. And it was only at a certain point in the evening, and I don't drink. I just want to make that point. I don't drink. But the rest of the audience, once they got to a certain tipping point, suddenly 100 became 1,000, and that fundraiser worked. So there's a need for face-to-face events, but there's also a place for virtual, and there's a place for hybrid. I think if you focus on just one, you're limiting yourself. You've got different audiences out there. You need a wide range of events.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting from a funding perspective. My mum actually runs a small charity, and she talks to me probably too often about how challenging it is to activate grants and foundation money like it was before. And the criteria is, nigh on impossible for lots of small charities to meet. And so they are moving towards being more innovative, including an events portfolio, in order to catch up on some of those holes left by the challenges that she's experiencing at the moment. And again, she's moved slightly towards a more informal style event, and has done very well to secure some, a venue for lowish money. And her particular charity is in Sri Lanka, and the restaurateur happens to be Sri Lankan. So utilising those kind of connections and contacts to maximise, because I know we haven't really touched on it today within the challenges, but cost for events has gone up, and in real terms. And I think the perception from an attendee, if you are paying a couple of £100 plus for a ticket, is that you've kind of done your bit. And actually, in real terms, we see a lot of event budgets where they're scraping to make a pre-event profit due to inflation and cost of goods and everything within that space, which I would suggest is probably what has put off historically some of those smaller organizations that might have a 100, 200 following, doing a live or in-person event. And I guess as Lorna will tell you, ducking and weaving and negotiating is all part of the skill set of the event manager.
Yes, I think trying to get that desirable ROI should be on everyone's minds. And if anyone comes back to you with a price, you can always ask if you can get it for cheaper. So definitely do. But to go back to sort of Laura's question as well, I think it's when with events, like it's always a bit scary to just scrap them when you've had success from event for so long. So I think it's really important to also try new things with that event. So for example, at Parkinsons UK, we do a research lecture annually, and it's happening in a few weeks, and feedback after the event is always really good. People really enjoy it. They find it really informative and understanding where their money's going, and it's sort of a stewardship cultivation event. But feedback is a lot of people are struggling to get there in November, and partly also for people with Parkinson's, it's quite cold to be out that late. So rather than sort of scrap it because we haven't got the turnout we quite wanted this year, we're going to mix it up a bit next year and do it in spring or summer, hopefully, and then add sort of a garden drinks reception maybe. We're not quite sure, but just we don't want to get rid of it because we know it works, but we just want to tweak it and change it. And I've done something similar at Muscular Dystrophy UK. We had a celebrity sports quiz at Lord's, and we really spoke to our committee and our supporters of like, why are we not selling tables anymore? It used to do so well. And feedback was that they were like, why are you holding it in March? Like, we can't see the cricket pitch. And it was just that simple bit of feedback of, oh, we'll move it to May. And also feedback from sports people is like, a lot more people could attend in May. So we got these amazing celebrities, and also the selling time for March is really difficult because you have to sell between December and January, and no one wants to buy anything in December. Well, they're buying Christmas presents in December, and then everyone's hibernating in January. So again, moving it to May, we had a much longer lead time, and that event now sells out regularly again. So I think you don't necessarily need to, I mean, obviously if it really was bad, then maybe get rid of it. But if it's not completely broken, there are ways you can salvage events for sure.
I mean, Christmas isn't a no-no, so that's changing as well. You know, years ago, everyone wanted to buy their kids 10,000 presents, £1 million each, and just end up with tons of boxes to throw away at the end of it. I think people are becoming a bit more savvy now, and you know, we're finding people wanting to buy donatable products for their on behalf of their kids. So there is that. You know, it's not the you know, Christmas and January are out. We're finding more and more people are saying, I don't want to buy my kids their 28th pair of trainers, but if I can, on their behalf, get them to buy something for school kids in Malawi, they will get engaged, and it'll be much more rewarding as well. So there are tastes are changing.
Thank you.
Yeah, great point.
That is a great point. It's again the evolution of fundraising events, guys. I think we've got time for one more question. And it's a good one to wrap up on. What do you think is the next big thing event fundraisers need to pay attention to, be it a type of event or a different tool? Shall I start with Adam?
Oh, well, type of event, I think, I mean, I'm just a big advocate of anyone that looks outside the box. And, you know, I think it's all those elements that we've discussed today, that immersion of an event should lead the charge. And I think that will become the most sustained event type going forwards, because people are so intrigued, and they'll be intrigued to see what happens next year, and that keeps audiences sticky.
I think building on that, I was in Madrid this time last year, and I was looking at simulation. And you know, you're talking about immersion and virtuality. With simulation now, you can get people to drop into an environment. They're not actually there. They can be, you know, we tested it with, rather than printing a big exhibition, we created a virtual exhibition during COVID and got people to come online, and each of them walk around at their own pace and, you know, view an exhibition, try out activities. And so it's at its early stages, because you know, it's not just VR headsets. I played around with these simulated hand things to be able to pick things up. It's a different type of engagement. It's really, really weird. I threw a pencil, and in a simulated environment, I hit someone in the face, and I was thinking, I'm not sure I wanted to do that, because I couldn't figure out how to pick it up, how to drop it. But these things are getting better and better. And I think when you create a simulation of, let's say, an earthquake zone, and say, right, imagine you're there, and this is the scale of the damage, this is what people are facing as challenges, then you will get much, much more engagement and interest from your donors.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Lorna, finally?
I think I'm probably just going to copy Adam because that's what I believe, but I think it's just these more creative, boutique, compelling events. I think sort of, yeah, especially sort of younger philanthropists, they want to understand where their money's going to, and it's building. I think what Faz was saying, it's like, why don't we build events around volunteering where they then have a social time at the end, or they get a chance to meet a Parkinson's nurse, or they get involved with tasks that helps them understand where money goes within a charity. I think it's really thinking of meaningful things that you can implement at your events that make the donors think and feel part of something. I think that's really, really important. And just continuing to trial and test tech that works to see what works for your audiences.
Brilliant. That's a lovely note to end on. Thank you very much, Lorna. And thank you to all of my panelists. It's been a really great session. It's been lovely to hear about how events have changed and how they will change, and yeah, the exciting things that are to come. Yeah, so thank you very much to everyone. I hope you've had a lovely session. I hope you've learnt a lot. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, just before we go, our next and final session within Stream 1 will start shortly. And it's going to be about trends in user journeys in 2025. Alternatively, you can head back to the main agenda and over to Stream 2 for our session in writing fundraising bids. So we'll see you shortly at 3:20. Thank you so much.